Before we begin the order of business, may I ask that we all rise for the singing of the national anthem by Mr. Emerson Ebreo. you very much, Mr. Iberian. May we all be seated. The third day of the sixth regular session of the 22nd Congress will now come to order. May we all rise again for a moment of silent prayer. Chief Clerk, roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Arrotos?
Yes.
Senator Christian? Senator Figuer? Senator Golan?
Yes.
Floor Leader Harper? Senator Gunman?
Yes.
Vice Speaker Moses?
Amen.
Senator Neto Pompey? Senator Neto Koshai? Senator Berman?
Amen.
Senator Romalo? Senator Uruzamal? Senator Wali? Speaker Sumina?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, 10 members are present.
We do have a quorum to transact business today. Before we continue, acting floor, Uruzamal, point of privilege.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me first of all congratulate the individuals singing the national anthem for doing a very good job. I was very moved by the way they were singing our national anthem, and I hope in every gathering we would be doing this. With that, Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of privilege to introduce some very important dignitaries who are observing our session today, this morning. Let me start, first of all, I am humble and very privileged to introduce for recognition His Excellency President David Panuala. Also with the President, Mr. Speaker, is no other than our Honorable Vice President, Aaron Palik, who's also sitting in the gallery. We also have, Mr. Speaker, the Acting Chief Justice of the CFSM Supreme Court, Acting Chief Justice Beauline Carl Worswick. And in the gallery, we are also honored to have the presence of the Governor of the State of Pohnpei, the Honorable Reed Oliver. Accompanying the President and the Vice President are members of the Cabinet, also sitting in the gallery, and I would defer to the delegation to introduce individually the Cabinet members from their own state. And moving on, we are also privileged to have with us members of the Diplomatic Corps, starting with the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Her Excellency Ambassador Joe Cowley of the Government of Australia. Representing the Government of Japan is His Excellency Hisashi Mishikami. From the U.S. Embassy, we have the Charge Affair, Mr. Anturu Posner. And from the People's Republic of China, we also have the Charge Affairs, Mr. Zhang Weito. The resident coordinator for the UN Micronesia office. Very simple for me, and may I introduce Mr. Speaker, Mr. Yap van Hertien. We also have in the gallery Keiichi Muraoka. And person from, a senior country officer, ATB, Miss Maybelline Anton Bing. There are members of the regional and international offices here in Pohnpei. May we recognize them with clapping of our hands. And may I also, on behalf of all of us, Mr. Speaker, thank those who are observing our session through this very modern technology of watching this proceeding on live stream. And I thank them for tuning in and ask them to open their eyes, open their ears, and listen carefully to what the President will be telling the nation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Acting Floor Leader Orisamo. At this time, I will recognize Vice Speaker Moses, if you have a point of privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the introductions were made, but it's customary in Pohnpei to recognize our non-marquees and non-cons first, so I apologize for that. Speaker, let me open with my respects in vernacular, since we are graced with the presence of our non-marquee of Matalanim and several non-cons in the gallery today. Maway tungol kay Punipango Puran was a labalab spow. Waunuki Sanankanan Wayne Matalanim, Waunuki Sanankanan Waynu, Waunuki Sanankanan Wayne Sokas, Waunuki Sanankanan Wayne Net, Waunuki Likant Matalanim. Speaker, my respects to you, members, my respects to the President, Vice President, the Governor, my respects to the Acting Chief Justice and her counterparts in the States, my respects to the Diplomatic Corps, and my respects to Cabinet members and all those observing in the gallery and through social media this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, I rise to the point of privilege to recognize those individuals, Highnesses, Majesties in the gallery today, and then I would like to ask that we yield the floor to the chairman of the Pohnpei delegation right after me. So we are graced today with His Majesty, His Highness Isabao, the non-marquee of Matalani. We are also, may we give him a round of applause. We also are graced today with His Highness, the Sonankan of Matilaning. We also are graced with His Highness, the Sonankan of U. We are also graced with His Highness Sonankan of Soquez. And we are also graced with His Highness Isanankan of Nets. We are also graced with the President of the Likant of the Municipality of Matilaning. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to ask that the floor be yielded to the Chairman of the Pohnpei delegation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Moses, for the introduction. The floor has been yielded to you, Delegation Chairman Pohnpei.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think what needs to be said has been said. But as a chairman of this delegation, my utmost respect to the traditional leaders of Pohnpei, and let me say that bear with me, I'll say that in our own Pohnpeian. Moe ay sakartaan kay Pwani Pon Rakson Pohnpeiu me masalapalap ko. Wow, to kay sonahan ko. Likent lapalap koros nan balian oleiso seriso. Pilay wow, sakartaan wow, mele to President, His Excellency Panuelo, Honorable Vice President Balik, Kapina and Pohnpei, Mr. Reed Oliver, Koros, Lapalapin Palian, Chiak, Government, Omomocho, Mayang, Kachtin, Ranich, Tatatokan Ranich. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to all in the gallery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Berman, for the additional introduction. Any other point of privilege? Acting floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I guess the singing of the national anthem already turned my brain all over the place, and forgot to introduce a friend, a relative, and person who is in charge of our post-secondary institution in CFSM. May I introduce for recognition, Mr. Speaker, His Excellency President Manny Mori, who is observing this session this morning. Thank you.
Are you done?
Speaker.
Okay. Chairman Cullen, point of privilege?
Without privilege, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In Chuki's word, Kiriso Chapur, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Chuk delegation, Fariteracho Chuk delegation, Ubuwi, Arts, and Nitin, Kiriso, Maparfairo, Gary, all the traditional leaders of Pohnpei, Governor of Pohnpei, President, Vice President, their cabinet, especially the diplomatic corps. We are very thankful for your presence. And Mr. Speaker, because of the constraint of time, I don't want to take this long. I just wanted to recognize all the Chukis who are present in this gallery today. I know if I single out all of them, I think it's going to be more than 100 or 200 names. And let me just generalizing all the Chukis that the election is coming in March 7. Don't forget to vote for us so we can continue work together. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Coonan, for the introduction. Any other point of privilege? Ned of Koshai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you and all the members. Just want to make it short. I allude to all the recognition and acknowledgement that was already presented. Looking around the gallery, I see only 2 Koshaians, so I don't know what happened. Hopefully by next term, we will have a lot of Koshaians working for the National. On behalf of the delegation of Koshai, I want to recognize His Excellency President Panuelo and also Vice President Palik, Haran Palik, and all the rest of the traditional leaders, diplomatic corps, and also the cabinet members, and all who are gathering today to observe our session today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Ned. Any other point of privilege? If none, I'm going to thank you, those members who have introduced some of our members or some of our dignitaries and citizens who are joining us this morning. And I joined you in extending a warm welcome to the traditional leaders and to the leadership of this nation, our international family and partners, and everyone who has joined us today in this chamber. And I also welcome those citizens and residents who are joining us through technology outside of Paligar. Welcome. During the special session in December of 2022, the Congress adopted resolution number 22-178, inviting our President to deliver the State of the Nation to the Congress and the nation. Today, our special order of business is to do just that, for the President to address the Congress and the people of the Federated States of Micronesia on the condition of our nation. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, may I ask that we all rise and allow me to introduce the 9th President of the Federated States of Micronesia, His Excellency David W. Panuelo. Sergeant at Arms, please escort President to the podium. Members of Congress, I have the distinct honor and privilege to present to you President Panuelo of the Federated States of Micronesia. You may take the podium, please. Please be seated.
Iyang Monsabogo Isoko. Mr. Speaker, and honorable members of the 22nd FSM Congress, kindly allow me to pay my respects in my native language to our traditional leaders. Iyang Monsabogo Isoko Ragatin Kupre Yen Kak Warong Bata Kalapako Isoko Chiengi Puse Sabulmar Tapakin Lang and Kaping O Wow Kepani Pan Kupren Enilap Samatrail Court Yeyas Mekatin Uya Koten Kotakan Nan Marki and Na Marki Kan O Kaunen Kaunakan Anso Karos Chingolen Chingol Sakaran Kepani Ponerak Soko and Ir Kalapako Koros and Bombeyu Pulik Wawote Ong Pan Kupuren Isonangan ko Wawnagi Sapulmar Likan ko Nanalang ko O Nan Kaniyay ko Wow Ong Sapulmar Lang Kosokos Karos Kaiti Choror Kan Nan Baliantia Government O Momodiso O Karos Mayang Kit the Patonan Chen Basranwat Ni Maysang Lelewat Rapil Katin Kubureye Weki Uya Pelik Pen Podla Pen Net O Isonangan Net Ipan Patoan Puse Pil Kapul Supplement Podla Pen Net O Isonangan Net Supplemara Tapakin Lang and Kapai Okay pani toror Ponerekso and wasala balabi si pao mekatin mole molranwat Nan margi and wen metelenim Erekso and wasala balab songoro Nan margi and waisonu Erekso and wasala balab soukselang Nan margi and wen kitri Erekso and wasala balab Nan putak pekeniap Nan margi and Wayne Sokes, Erekso Tokasa, Nan margi and Wayne Pinglap, Erekso Paywaylang, Nan margi and Wayne Sapafik, Wow lap, Pan Kupuren Isonan Ken ko, Wow Niki Sapulmar Liken ko, Wow Ong Chon Pokonisowat, Melel Mon Sapoko Ranwat o Isoko Megatin Moletier Mol Ranwat. Dan program Bekchaipan Ketlang Lole the Ketir Lole and so kiset. Mon Sapoko Isoko O Karos Reketin Kupurekenie A Chungol Lepin Sepul Sepulen Pueki Nie Wia Sapulmar President and Kanta Kapatapat and FSM Ayen Pachowan Pata O Wia report Me Speaker Sakargitar, Menan Par Karos, reporting State of the Nation Bankin Wiyawi, Apueki Par Riau, Me Kichail Pil Luyang, Kanta Kapatapatuat Pueki Lumum, Sumau and COVID, a Par Riau Pil, Wiata Kapal, Uiban Polapene Sakarata report what Kapatamene Parke. O ban imusaklan sa karatan State of the Nation Address ong nan administration word. Apweki chungol report o sa karata e ban kakacharere o kareta kupurkan arbang kachin rala ang so giset ibang uyay kasabal kalangan pan kupuren mon sa poko isoko pweki kupurmao ir so peti ko ye so peti ko me uyamen kay roir o Kupur lol ken kau kawait kich kame uyason papa melel nan kanta ka kapatapatwat ora ka tin kupure. My deepest respects to the traditional leaders of our land, especially those who are in this chamber today, in Bombay and throughout our nation. The Honorable Wesley W. Simina, Speaker of the 22nd FSM Congress, the Honorable Aaron Balik, the Vice President of the FSM, the Honorable members of this 22nd FSM Congress, First Lady of our nation, Patricia Edwin, and Second Lady of our nation, Mrs. Balik, Acting Chief Justice and Associate Justices of the FSM, governors of our states throughout the FSM, and especially Governor Oliver, who has joined us today, and your family, Speaker and members of our state legislatures throughout our federation, State Chief Justices and Associate Justices, especially Chief Justice Nelson, who has joined us today from Bombay, Dean and members of the Diplomatic Corps, head of regional and international organizations who have kindly joined us today, church and religious leaders of our nation, my dear citizens here in the FSM and throughout the FSM and abroad, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I noted in here before I begin the remarks and the State of the Nation address that I ask for your indulgence today because my State of the Nation will be lengthy. I beg your indulgence to consider it my last labor of love, and so hereby overstay your welcome, Speaker and members of Congress, and those who are here, I ask for your extra patience and courtesy. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today, our dear citizens, and our nation today, in response to the invitation that you and members of the 22nd FSM Congress have so kindly extended to me to deliver the last State of the Nation address for this administration. I wish to extend my deepest respect and appreciation to you and all members of the 22nd FSM Congress for your continued leadership and dedication to serving our people of the Federated States of Micronesia. Our nation, Mr. Speaker, as I've always termed, this paradise in our backyards, will celebrate this coming May, a momentous occasion, 2023, 44 years of constitutional government, and bring in its 10th President and 23rd Congress. I am humbled, Mr. Speaker, by your gracious and consistent determination to see to it that our nation's greatest strengths, our peace, and you know, I have to say that we need not take our peace for granted because throughout the world today, we can see the state of world affairs and the harmony of our region is very, very valuable. The greatest strengths, our peace, our unity, and our liberty, Mr. Speaker, remain at the forefront of all of our deliberations. Mr. Speaker, I wish for my address to be a report on some of the major work accomplished and completed during this administration, with additional discussion on programs and activities that are forthcoming and or ongoing, as well as those worth pursuing into the future and ongoing commitments from our government to our citizens. And to our citizens who are observing today, I also ask for your patience because this report will be lengthy. Mr. Speaker, given that perhaps the single most impactful situation for our citizens individually and collectively during this administration has been the COVID-19 pandemic, I will begin with our nation's victory over the coronavirus. In early 2020, we all recall, our government projected the loss of thousands of lives, in addition to significant impacts on our social and economic development platforms. Where other countries failed to put lives and livelihoods first, we succeeded. Through great dedication across our whole of society, we succeeded at mitigating the impacts of the pandemic to our people and our economy. Through generous support from the United States, we vaccinated our population. We cannot thank you enough. With generous support from the Asian Development Bank and Congress, Mr. Speaker, we developed our nation's first social protection programming. We protected businesses through the 14 million FSM economic stimulus package, which was dispersed through hotels, tour operators, exporters, restaurants of the pandemic. This saved hundreds of jobs and by extension ensured families could continue to survive and have a livelihood. This was augmented by the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or famously known as PUA. I think this was pronounced throughout our communities. The PUA program generously provided to the FSM by the U.S. Department of Labor, which provided tens of millions in direct assistance to citizens who became unemployed as a result of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, additionally, we protected families through the 9.3 million low-income household assistance program, which assisted 9,300 households, and I repeat, households across the FSM. I remember being in Chuk with you, Speaker, and the Governor of Chuk in distributing those checks, which benefited many families, and specifically those who do not have access to formal means of income generation. $3 million, as we all recall, was provided to the FSM Development Bank to finance the micro and small loans program, a transformative interest-free program that targeted small businesses. This produced 280 plus small businesses throughout the Federation, such as retail stores, truck rental owners, laundromat owners, small-scale farmers and fishers. I am proud that 57 of these small businesses are owned by women, and the program specifically targeted that at least 50% of recipients of these small microloans has to be women to help with the gender balance. Thank you. While it remains terrible, Mr. Speaker, and we can still feel it in our hearts, that hundreds of Micronesians died abroad, sadly, COVID claimed a dozen of precious lives within our borders. However, we all know that without our high rate of vaccination and without preparation, COVID could have claimed thousands more, as initially predicted by CDC, or Centers for Disease Control. While the coronavirus will continue to be with us, today we can claim our victory over the coronavirus pandemic and a return to normalcy. And it is so refreshing to see that we can be here without the fear of the coronavirus, as we have seen that virus having wreaked havoc throughout our communities in the FSM. It is also in this respect, Mr. Speaker, that I wish to highlight the service of both our late Dr. Livingston Taulang, as well as that of all of our nation's health workers. Dr. Taulang laid the foundation for giving our nation COVID-19 free, which Secretary Samo and our nation's first responders maintained until this summer. Any success that this administration, that this Congress, and that our state governments can ascribe with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic ultimately lay at their collective feet. For this, they have our eternal gratitude, and may I say and ask that we give all of our frontline workers a round of applause. Thank you. It behooves me to also emphasize the heroism of our former Vice President. We all miss our former Vice President, my dear friend and mentor, Joshua George. Vice President George dedicated his life to the service of this nation, well into his 80s. He served the FSM with unquestionable leadership and integrity. He spent his whole life to building our nation's prosperity. With his humility, his leadership, and his friendship, and his insight, as well as his foresight, particularly when our nation faced the COVID-19 pandemic, was essential to the good decisions that our country made. There is but one more piece of work to be done, I believe, Mr. Speaker, regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, I solicit our Congress to reconsider the necessity of the Healthy Border Protection Act in its current form. While vaccines remain the best solution for the goal of preventing severe disease, whether it be COVID or measles, I believe, Mr. Speaker, we are now at the time where we must allow any FSM citizen, regardless of vaccination status, to come back home on their own terms. The Healthy Border Protection Act has been an essential piece of legislation for protecting our country, but amending it so as to allow FSM citizens to come home and go as they please from our own home country, Mr. Speaker, I believe equally essential to the continued longevity of our democracy. As a final comment on issues relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Speaker, we all know and appreciate that the pandemic paused several, actually many of our nation's important initiatives and services, and we are seeing engineers and experts coming into our country doing assessments for the major projects that are now being implemented, and I will go through some of them. Thus, one item I wish to inform you, our Congress and our people, that the FSM census, national census, is wrapping up its preliminary work, which had been delayed due to our prohibitions on international and oftentimes domestic travel. I am advised by the Secretary of the Department of R&D that we will be implementing the household surveys from the middle of February, or next month, to the middle of April this year. I encourage all FSM citizens and residents to participate in the census, which will gather the socioeconomic information of households. The census, Mr. Speaker, is a fundamental part of our national heritage and collective knowledge that provides statistics that are essential for planning, provision of health care, education, and employment. Mr. Speaker, of paramount importance to our nation-building process is the accrual and positive use of funding from friends, allies, and development partners for the betterment of our citizens' lives and livelihoods. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that this administration has seen And I'm not going to exaggerate because there's the tendency of every administration to be biased. But somehow, Mr. Speaker, and to our citizens and all of our development partners, somehow maybe the sympathy, whatever the factors that contributed to the success of this administration has seen the greatest amount of financial growth and support as measured by foreign support in our nation's history. You recall that our Office of ODA, Official Development Assistance, which was created with the policy by Congress, and I was in Congress at the time. And over the course of this administration, Mr. Speaker, and outside of funding received from the Compact of Free Association, outside of it, our nation has received a total of $747+ million over the past 3.5 years. And this is enumerated carefully over and over by our ODA and reviewed by our cabinet that we went over thoroughly over the course of last few months, including during the preparation of this State of the Nation address. We received $747 million plus in external donor support, though the figure would be higher if we could financially measure certain forms of in-kind assistance. Part of the success is due to the improved coordination between the nation and its development partners since the establishment of the Overseas Development Assistance, or ODA, policy in 2013. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you for it and the members of Congress. But today, may I ask our entire leadership of the nation and our citizens to give a round of applause to our development partners, because this is, in fact, without the partnership of our foreign partners, some of whom are present here, this would not have been possible. May I ask that we give them a round of applause, please. Thank you to our development partners. Our nation has received over $18.2 million in the agriculture sector, $22.4 million in the climate change sector, and $22.8 million for water security. We received $166 million in the communications sector and $100 million for tackling COVID-19 and developing the social protection program. We received $961,000+ in the cultural development sector, and this is small given that culture is very important for our nation, and over $28.9 million in the education sector. Please note that these are outside of the compact sector assistance. We received over $77 million in the energy sector and $33.9 million in the fisheries sector. During this administration, Mr. Speaker, the nation was able to receive over $20.2 million for improving good governance. And I've always said that the rule of law, preserving the rules-based international order is vital to make sure that rule of law works. And I'm glad that that amount of money has been given to good governance. And $35.2 million for the health sector. This amount does not include what the nation receives from the compact sector health grant annually. Furthermore, the nation has received $157 million for the infrastructure sector and $58.46 million for its transport sector. The greatest contributors to our nation's development initiatives include, and they are present here today, the United States of America, thank you, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the government of Japan, thank you, the government of the People's Republic of China, thank you, the European Union, thank you, Australia, thank you, and India, thank you. I would like to extend a special recognition to our NGOs such as the Micronesian Conservation Trust, our regional partners such as SPC, FFA, or the Foreign Fisheries Agency, SPREP, the South Pacific Regional Environment Program, and the multiple agencies of the United Nations. The hard work and dedication of these organizations have helped us mobilize more financial and non-financial resources than ever before. Thank you all. On behalf of our nation and on behalf of Congress and entire leadership, we thank you all. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that in September 2022, Congress endorsed the 6th ODA nationwide priorities through Congress Resolution 22-62. It is my pleasure to provide an update on these priorities and how much ODA has been committed to these priorities, and I thank our cabinet. I always say I'm very proud of our cabinet, because the extension of your success is the close people that surround you, and I extend a special recognition now to our cabinet, our ODA. They are very professional staff and secretaries that I must reiterate again of how proud I am of them. Mr. Speaker, the Bathe the Nation initiative, we have $100 million in this priority area. Renewable energy, we have $67 million in this priority area. Water security system for the FSM, we have $9 million. Vocational school, and I pause here and thank you all. I understand, Chairman Urusumal, that you've recommitted the program SEEP to committee for more dialogue to have oversight. And this is the money from World Bank. With Congress's approval of the resolution, will begin or start to revive the PATS Vocational Training Center, which will also help other states or the state's high school programs with form of equipment and training. And we look forward to a very productive engagement. Our cabinet stands ready to come in with more oversight hearings with your committee and entire members of Congress. With approval of the 17.7 million, this program can begin, because right now we're talking about the ban on foreign workers, and we need to focus on improving skill sets for our young youth to become productive members of our communities and thus for our entire nation. Mr. Speaker, the climate resilient infrastructure for outer islands transport, I regret to inform you that we are yet to generate more revenue or funding support in this area. So there's no funding. I was making sure that we don't only talk about our successes, but areas without funding in this priority area, we will be expounding more on it later on the State of the Nation address. For the medical diagnostic facility that we approved, Congress approved as a priority area, there's no funding yet. In response to the priorities that have not secured funding, Mr. Speaker, in this session we submitted additional funding so that it can help with the development partners roundtable meeting that I intend to invite development partners, so we can look at the caps of where funding has not been achieved so that we can progress the nation's development. So in the margins of our state and national leadership conference that I tentatively scheduled for April of this year, and I know this is towards the end of this administration, but we must continue work so as to enable states and the national government to convey the pending priorities to our development partners. And I hope that we can work on a successful donor roundtables conference with our nation. A supplemental request, as I've said, is pending before Congress. We hope that that can be given consideration during this session. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I think it is worthwhile to discuss some of the foreign assistance in greater detail. I warn that this State of the Nation address will be lengthy. Many citizens experience hearing that the FSM government receives money, and we see that a lot. You know, social media is a very powerful tool to gauge the heartbeat and the reactions of our citizens, and they question, where does the money go? And then that's it when they see it comes in, but they don't hear the details. They don't know where it goes, so it's valuable for us to discuss some of the assistance the FSM receives from our friends, allies, and development partners, both as a way of thanking them through its address, or this address, and as a way of informing our citizens of how the different aid projects impact their respective communities or our respective communities. Beginning with international financial institutions, during this administration, we received approximately 74.3 million from the Asian Development Bank in approved projects, with key projects including the 19 million renewable energy development project that supports Koshai. I will start with the smallest state, providing solar in Tofol and the first mini-grid system in Koshai in the remote villages of Walong and Tafonsak, and several solar home systems. Additionally, for Yap, another small state, the project includes solar systems and an upgraded utility-wide software communication and control system, and battery energy storage system. There is also a 4 million as a disaster risk reduction component that will support the development of a national energy disaster management plan and the procurement of essential spare parts for utilities. The renewable energy development project is expected to be constructed and commissioned by mid-2024. Asian Development Bank, or ADB, supports the Chuk water supply and sanitation project. Of course, funding for our nation's social protection program, which was also done by ADB, including the low-income household assistance program, among others, through the health expenditure and livelihood support program, COVID-19 pandemic response option. When combined with other projects such as the climate resilient and water project and the Pacific disaster reduction resilience program, among many others, Mr. Speaker, we can continue to count support from the Asian Development Bank to partner with our nation in helping us achieve our needs. In addition, ADB has committed to providing the FSM 25 million as part of the Panuelo Palik administration's Pave the Nation initiative. Another financial institution worthy of mention, the World Bank, is another such partner of the FSM, and there is much to be said of this partnership. We have recently enjoyed the opening of a World Bank office in our country, which will help to ensure that the 173.2 million of approved projects during this administration will reach their potential or maximum potential. These projects, Mr. Speaker, are all indicative of this administration's top priorities, such as the Pave the Nation initiative to construct climate resilient roads and our efforts to improve reliability of electricity supply, expand access to electricity, and scale up renewable energy so as to increase FSM's energy security and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Some of these projects include the Prioritized Road Investment and Management Enhancements Project, or known as PRIME, and the Strategic Climate-Oriented Reduction Enhancements Project, known as SCORE, which are collectively about 75 million in support of the Pave the Nation initiative. The PRIME project includes urgent priority work such as the Manda Ray in Yap, twin bridges in Yap, the Lela Causeway will be lifted and given currents to go under and boats probably to go under the causeway, and the 1 mile airport to Po Bay Road in Chuk, and the Hawak Bridge in Bone Bay. The SCORE project targets secondary roads, specifically the Tukor to Payal secondary road in Yap, the east and west Po loop in Chuk, the Nanpomal to Sekere bypass road, and the Chamans road. And I'm sure that our Nan-Margi of Metalanim, he has been asking, and the Chamans road to Nanmatol in Bombay, and the Seyalat bypass road in Koshai. These are all candidates for these projects, and engineers have assessed these projects for implementation soonest. The World Bank also contributes to support the FSM through providing upgrades to the Hokat, Pohnpei, Tomil, and Chuk ports through the $39 million FSM Maritime Investment Project. For the energy sector, $30 million is for the Sustainable Energy and Development Access Project. The purpose of this project is to improve reliability of electricity supply, expand access to electricity, and scale up renewable energy generation. This includes, Mr. Speaker, the construction of a new power plant at the Nanpomal power plant in Pohnpei, or in Nanpomal, and in Chuk, and additional solar in Weno. The establishment of a mini grid on Utot, the island of Utot, and the hybrid systems of both conventional generators and solar system that connect all households in Satawan. In Kusai, there will be an additional battery storage and control system. In Yap, brand new high-speed generator. These projects will commence construction this year and completed by 2024. So we can see that many major infrastructure projects with the support of our financial institution partners are being implemented. The European Union FSM SE, or Sustainable Energy, is part of the overall Sustainable Energy and Accompanying Measure, or SEAM project, funded from the FSM National 11th European Development Fund, or EDF. It is a budget of about $11 million. The project is undergoing a review of the 2012 National Energy Policy Development of the FSM's SDG 7 roadmap, state-level consultation toward developing FSM's energy investment plan, provisions of scholarship in the amount of $140,000 for STEM students in their sophomore years and internship, employment extension for the 4 state energy officers, 10 outdoor island sites in Etan, Phefen, Pole, Peace, Peno, Neme, Moch, Lukunot, Nomin Unknown. I think I'm pronouncing some of these names not so right, Mr. Speaker, and Oak, to do detailed feasibility studies by which 2 or 3 of these sites will be solarized in the state of Chuk, and rehabilitation of the Falalap Uliti mini grid in the state of Yap. The 5 million Micronesia Public Sector Building Energy Efficiency project is funded by GEF, or the Global Environmental Facility, UNDP. The project has completed all 4-stage energy audits on each state's selected public facilities and commenced procurement process to retrofit appliances and fixtures. The state facilities include Pohnpei State Hospital, Pohnpei State Governor's Office, Yap Radio Station and Administration Building, Chuk State Hospital, and Chuk State High School, Koshai High School, and the Fansak Elementary, which will be retrofitted with solar-powered air conditions and other appliances. The installation will be completed 3rd quarter of next year. When combined with other essential projects such as a $30.8 million digital FSM project, Mr. Speaker, which includes connecting fiber optic cables to our businesses and communities, as well as the setup of our digital FSM office, we can truly see that the World Bank support to the FSM's development remains invaluable. We are seeing the construction and rehabilitation of roads to be climate resilient through the Bathe the Nation initiative. more islands becoming electrified in the Chuk Lagoon and elsewhere. And with the digital FSM office, we will see the transfer of ICT-related roles across national agencies to the office by June 2023 and transition the FSM government to a single Microsoft information domain, email, and collaboration services environment by December 2023. Of the possible caps not addressed by the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, our nation has been partnering with the Green Climate Fund. We've heard about GCF. And during this administration, Mr. Speaker, and I will pause here because, again, it's not an exaggeration, but our nation is the only country that received 2 grant awards from the GCF throughout the Pacific region. And I've been told that many times. We received the 2 approved projects. One project is the 19.6 million climate change adaptation solutions for local authorities in the FSM project, which will empower local communities and municipal governments to achieve climate solutions. The Green Climate Fund also benefits the FSM through the $9.6 million climate resilient food security for farming households across the FSM. This has already started, which will result in 68,250 direct beneficiaries across our nation, as it will empower farmers and their families to rely less on imported food or foodstuffs and encourage larger domestic production of healthier local food. Activities include the first FSM-wide baseline vulnerability assessment of the nation's entire agriculture system and food security capacity in the development of farmers' collectives and the creation of value-added food items for import substitute. Mr. Speaker, all this talk about money could lead one to ask about the performance of our banking system. And our Vice President, when we were talking, he has a lot of insight because his background in banking and finance. And as to the performance of our own banking system, as you know, we have our Banking Commission. I am pleased to report that our system is safe, sound, and strong. Capital, liquidity, and profitability remain satisfactory at this trend, and this trend is expected to remain solid for the foreseeable future. During the past 4 years, our banking system's total assets has increased from 371 million to 476 million. The loan portfolio is presently comprised of 16.6% of the system's assets, of which 55.8% are commercial loans and 44.2% are consumer loans. The deposit portfolio is at 437.9 million, and there is no sign indicating a downward trend. But we need, Mr. Speaker, to improve our loan-to-deposit ratio. I'm sure the leadership of the nation reviews the reports that comes from our commercial banks every year to compare the loan-to-deposit ratio of our commercial banks by increasing domestic commercial loans in order to capture more benefits from the use of bank deposits to fund and support high-value business projects and opportunities in our country. So rather than shifting out a lot of the money that is deposited in our banks outside for investment, that we need to find more projects to help accelerate our development in our nation. The FSM Development Bank, and the president is a good friend of mine and alum at the Eastern Oregon University, so has our vice president. The FSM Development Bank approved and booked 944 loans totaling 14.4 million in 2001, a 47% increase compared to 2020. And those 944 loans, 48% for businesses and the rest were for home construction and consumer loans. This section, or the sectors that are or were the most impacted were the tourism and construction sectors, as you all know, during the COVID period. The outstanding loan portfolio at the year's end was 41.8 million. In addition to a strong banking system, Mr. Speaker, our nation is blessed with 2 trust funds. And I will pause here to thank our partner in the first trust fund, excuse me, the United States of America. The nation is blessed with 2 trust funds, one as a result of our compact and one as a result of our own dedication. The Compact Trust Fund, Mr. Speaker, is approximately $1 billion, and I say this to our nation's citizens because this is for the future of the future for our young generations. 1 billion or a little bit over at this time of this address. And the Sovereign Trust Fund that we have collectively built, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you and members of Congress, is approximately or close to 400 million, as you can see, and growing. I thank Congress because we have done some very smart investments in our country. We earmark the major revenue sources, which are our fisheries. 20% is automatically being deposited into our Sovereign Trust Fund. And from the MRA, or the Micronesian Registrar's Advisory, with whom we have a private and public partnership for major corporations out of Japan for corporate taxes paid to our country. We also earmark that to automatically have 50% of that go into that trust fund building. So as we, the nation, even while we are sleeping, these funds continue to accrue interest for the betterment of our future citizens. I remember even as a college student writing to President Aklolgam at the time, asking that we start a FSM trust fund. But as I was in Congress in 2011, I believe, Mr. Speaker, the trust fund, our sovereign trust fund, was only at 5 million. So over the course of the last few years, we accelerated the growth of that fund. And I have to tell you, Speaker, and members of Congress, that I congratulate the foresight of this leadership of Congress and past members of Congress. Thank you again for your leadership. The United States of America, with whom the FSM shares an enduring partnership codified through the Compact of Free Association, remains our nation's premier friend, ally, and development partner. Beyond ongoing support in the education and health sectors, during this administration, we've chipped away as much as possible on the existing compact infrastructure sector's backlog. I remember former President Mori, during his administration, some of the frustrations of the backlog of the infrastructure. Mr. President, I congratulate you and the previous administrations for working to chip away the backlog of infrastructure. This administration, and I thank specifically the Department of TCNI and the JCRB for the accelerated discussions to put all of the projects and commit them so that we can see the timeline for implementation, and it is scaled back substantially. And then we're working, Mr. Speaker, to speed up implementation of the backlog of the substantial infrastructure compact money that is still pending. For the state of Chuk, we have received 2 infrastructure grant awards for the design of dispensaries and schools. Among these, we've gone out for bid and awarded contracts for these 3 dispensaries in Romanum, did I pronounce it right, Onon and Phonoton, totaling 2.7 million. We've received a grant award for the construction phase of 3 health sectors within the Chuk Lagoon, and of course the 70 million Chuk State Hospital remains the next big project, which CHEMCO has recently, in the meeting that was held here, Mr. Speaker, in the FSM a few months ago, acknowledged the importance and urgency thereof for its implementation. For the state of Pohnpei, we have received infrastructure sector grant assistance towards the Pohnpei Utilities Iron Removal Plant, which was recently dedicated, as well as grant assistance towards the Pohnpei State Emergency Operations Center that I believe is being built, Governor, next to your office. More recently, the Project Management Office in Pohnpei has brought on board a new program manager who has issued 4 projects to bid in the past couple of months, including the $10 million Kinakap Water Line project, $5 million for the Lukop Elementary School's renovations, $5 million for the Palikir Elementary School renovations, and $8 million for the primary healthcare facility. We're on track for Pohnpei's balance of $80 million in backlog to fully bid it out by May 2023, Governor. For the state of Kushai, we have received 2 infrastructure sector grants for the Okat Bridge utility relocation and the Kushai agricultural facility projects. Like Chuk State, we are hopeful that the Kushai Hospital will be in the implementation stage very soon. And through recent communications between myself and the Secretary of the Department of Interior, Secretary Allen of the U.S. TOI, there is increased visibility and awareness on behalf of the U.S. government on the importance of this project moving forward as expeditiously as possible. We are on track to fully obligate the $38 million balance for the Kushai State Hospital once the grant is awarded, and we are awaiting the award of the grant. For the state of Yap, we have received infrastructure sector grant awards for the Yap water storage tanks and the Yap water supply projects for the 6.7 million Woliai airport projects. And I know this has been asked by the Yap delegation, especially Chairman Urusumal. Bids closed on November 30th, 2022. And I know that this has been delayed because of the non-performance of the earlier bid awards given to a private company that did not undertake the project. And we are awaiting final evaluation. For the 8 million Kanir Bridge, the environmental assessment is ongoing with the design completion expected by October of this year or 2023. For the Yap High School, Colonia Middle School, and the Woliai High School projects, the procurement approach has shifted to design build, which was sanctioned by the Yap State Legislature to expedite their implementation. An independent review of drawings to determine usable details is ongoing before the preparation of the final request for proposal for issuance by the end of March 2023. We are on track to fully obligate the remaining balance of $40 million for Yap by March 2023. So you can see that the backlog of the infrastructure with the dedication of our technical people at the PMU and the state counterpart offices are working very hard to expedite implementation of the backlog infra projects for the FSM under the Compact of Free Association. Mr. Speaker, with all this talk again about money, I believe now is an appropriate segue to discuss our ongoing negotiations on the expiring economic provisions of the Compact of Free Association as amended. As you know, Mr. Speaker, some of you are members of the JCRP actively working with the U.S. to make sure that we accelerate the work. When I came into office in the early part of the administration, I met President Trump to say that we start the negotiations, and then it transitioned to President Biden. And I believe now most of the negotiations are reaching a point where we hope that there will be some agreement. The good news is that there is much we have already completed successfully. with regards to our compact negotiations. The U.S. Special Envoy for Compact Negotiations, Ambassador Yoon, is recently in the FSM, and I believe that discussions of top sector level was discussed with Yoon, and there's some form of agreement that a level of 140 million per year may be possible, but still may be fluid. This represents more than 50 million increase as we speak from the current level on sector fund assistance. I have also made clear that in addition to this sector grant assistance, a one-time contribution of funds into the Compact Trust Fund remains a critical component of our nation's economic requirements and is necessary for the health and sustainability of the fund. And our JCRB again have recently met in Washington, D.C. on the technical meetings, and I believe that in early next month, there will be another engagement with the United States. That said, Mr. Speaker, there remains some important work to be done before our nation's negotiating teams can sign off. Among these include an agreed upon inflation index. We're asking for full inflation. You know that any purchasing power at this day and age can be very impactful if it's not at full inflation because of increasing costs. The development of mutually acceptable subsidiary agreements that are appropriate for the next compact period. The continuation of essential U.S. programs such as Pell Grants and other important issues such as updating the Fiscal Procedures Agreement or the FPA to reflect more deference to the FSM in the management and implementation of funding assistance, and the potential reinstatement of several U.S. Department of Education programs that are valuable for our FSM students. So now I want to take the opportunity to thank you, Speaker, and the JCRB, our chairman and the chief negotiator, for the hard work that they are doing, representing our country in making sure that the interests of our nation is achieved before we sign with the U.S. some agreed form of agreement on the ongoing negotiations with the United States. Mr. Speaker, our nation's security is the next topic I would like to address. Philosophically, one could argue that virtually any topic of concern is a security threat, such as access to healthy food at levels that keep our citizens well-nourished and healthy, and access to educational programming that keep our citizens literate and be critical thinkers. Climate change certainly is what we primarily think of as our topmost security threat, and it remains our nation's foremost existential threat. But I'd like to focus on more traditional areas of security for our collective awareness and discussion at this time, Mr. Speaker. Given the geopolitical atmosphere in the Pacific, one of the results we are seeing, and that our Congress and our citizenry should know about, is increased attention from the U.S. Armed Forces. And I would just touch a few of these. Among these, we look forward to the expansion of our ports, such as the State of Yap, and increased presence of the U.S. Navy Seabees. While most of the attention from the U.S. Armed Forces has positive economic and societal benefits to our nation, we should also begin to expect an increase in training exercises, as we have been doing, Mr. Speaker, taking place in and around our ocean and territory. Paramount importance is our nation's citizenry be informed in advance when U.S. fighter jets fly over, for example, the State of Yap. When we see practice firing of anti-aircraft missiles from the ground, these exercises will continue to increase in frequency over the next several years. And while these are ultimately in our national interest and the interests of our nation's security, of which the U.S. is our indisputable partner and guardian through the compact, as the pillars of our cooperation includes political, economic, and security. It is important that our citizens know about them well in advance so that our people do not see them and immediately fear the worst. An enduring threat to the FSM has been the form of illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing activities in our ocean and territory. Last year, FSM signed a first-of-its-kind expanded shipwrighter agreement with the United States, which is intended to further operationalize, strengthen, and modernize the existing shipwrighter agreement, Mr. Speaker. This agreement allows for remote coordination of authorities and so results in enabling the U.S. Coast Guard to act on FSM's behalf in combating illicit maritime activity. Additionally, the FSM will soon be receiving the second Guardian-class vessel from Australia to replace our previous patrol boats. And we'll also be receiving, Mr. Speaker, 4 patrol boats donated by the government of Japan, 1 for each of our states, which should have the effect of helping our nation defend its sovereignty and, of course, our resources. Another threat to our nation's security, which has been on the increase of both state and non-state actors, is the arena of cybersecurity and cyber activity. I am thankful for Congress's support for our Cybersecurity and Intelligence Bureau, a division of Department of Justice, and would solicit the Congress's support for passing our proposed cybercrimes bill. At the beginning of this administration, Mr. Speaker, we aimed at joining the Interpol, or International Criminal Police Organization, or Interpol, and successfully obtained full membership. For the efforts of improving police cooperation and fighting transnational crimes. And passing the cybercrimes bill, Mr. Speaker, will be instrumental in helping our country to prosecute cybercrimes, of which perhaps the most common we see in our country's context of scams from Africa and South Asia targeting our nation's citizens for things like money transfers and the like. And I have seen experiences of businesses losing wire transfers because of the imitation of these cybercrimes in wire transfers that imitates and then collects money without the business's knowledge. The last item I wish to address from a national security lens is the current status of the $70 million East Micronesia Cable Project and our telecommunications sector. Graciously funded by the United States, with whom we share the enduring partnership, Japan, with whom we share a Kitsuna or special bond, and Australia, with whom we share a trusted Pacific partnership. The East Micronesia Cable, or EMC, is ultimately the piece of physical infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, that will democratize digital communications for the state of Koshai, as well as for our brothers and sisters in Kiribati and Nauru. We all know that Koshai is the only remaining state without the connection of the fiber cable, and so this is making this possible. After several years of various forms of delays and setbacks, Mr. Speaker, I am advised by the boards of the FSM Telecommunications Corporation and the Open Access Entity, or OAE, that both of the FSM government entities are fully on board with the East Micronesia Cable project. We expect to sign the grant agreements within the coming weeks so that work on this essential project can move forward in an expeditious manner. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the 22nd FSM Congress for passing the resolution in support of the East Micronesia Cable project, as it emphasized that the FSM government takes this important issue very seriously in showcasing that to our development partners who are or have been generous in funding this project. In addition to the East Micronesia Cable project, the FSM looks forward to the entry of Starlink. As a matter of fact, I was communicating directly with the Starlink individuals because we met them at the U.S. Pacific Islands Summit. And into our nation's economy, they will be coming in with some sample small satellites that they will bring in, which I have seen myself during the summer of 2023. Starlink satellites provide internet connectivity to remote places around the world. It will be in our national interest, including our security interests, such as when our nation faces king tides, tsunamis, and typhoons, to utilize these and other forms of communication so that our remote communities are able to send and receive information prior to and during and after times of crisis. Our blue Pacific continent has undergone substantial growth, Mr. Speaker, over the course of this administration. After much discussion and, yes, soul-searching among Pacific Island leaders, our Pacific Islands Forum has emerged as a stronger and more resilient organization through the Suva Agreement. The sovereign Micronesian countries have found and defended our voice, and we're now part of a renewed and strengthened Blue Pacific. For our part, we can expect that the next Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum will serve a 5-year term and will come from Micronesia. We can and should begin the work of interacting with the brothers and sisters in Palau, the Marshall Islands, Nauru, and yes, Kiribati, who we continue to offer an olive branch to determine who the next Secretary General should be. Additionally, Micronesia will host the Pacific Ocean Commissioner and their office, as well as the sub-regional office of the Pacific Islands Forum. Your FSM government is exploring how it might become the host of the sub-regional office for the Pacific Islands Forum. It is also worth noting, Mr. Speaker, as this is something that Congress and our people can take pride in, is that the FSM played an essential role in crafting the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent alongside our Pacific brothers and sisters. This regional strategy comprehensively aligns and understandably and in human language what the Pacific believes in, what the Pacific wants, and how the Pacific will get what it wants while supporting, never compromising its beliefs. As for the United Nations Multi-Country Office, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased beyond my capacity to express it in that our nation has been blessed with the service of Yap Van Eerten, the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Micronesia. Now that the FSM is the host to the United Nations Multi-Country Office for the Micronesian sub-region, it is our responsibility for them to find them a home, for us to find them a home. For our part, the FSM government has been working with Bombay State government to help determine the best location for the permanent site of the United Nations Multi-Country Office, as well as possibly other external development partners. At this time of my address, we are increasingly interested in several areas immediately across the Embassy of the People's Republic of China, and I believe the site at the Botanical Garden. And we are actively working with Bombay State and the Bombay Legislature to identify these locations. And as I see some of the members of legislature are here, I want to say that as a host state to our nation, Bombay plays a very big obligation in making sure that we are friendly to our development partners and these entities that are in country to help us in our development. Mr. Speaker, our nation's foreign policy of being a friend to all and enemy to none, a nation that extends to all peoples and nations that which we seek, peace, friendship, cooperation, and love in our common humanity, as and continues to serve us well. Over the course of this administration, our country has shown time and again, though our population is small, Mr. Speaker, our voice is large. We can all be proud of our nation's assertive voice on matters of national, regional, and truly global importance. We can all be proud of our nation's assertive voice on matters of, and I repeat, national, regional, and truly global importance. From recognizing the Honorable Fiame Naomi of Samoa after her swearing-in ceremony, to severing our nation's relations with the Russian Federation through their brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine. And from condemning the former US government in the attempted insurrection, to warning the Pacific Island leaders of the common development vision so that we can find what is in the best interest of the Pacific Island nations. This paradise in our backyards has shown the world that we jealously guard, Mr. Speaker, our sovereignty, as we also jealously guard the Pacific way of peace, unity, and liberty. We have shown the world, as well as our people, that the Federated States of Micronesia will truly be a friend to all and an enemy to none. But also that by doing so, Mr. Speaker, we will always act with and for the FSM's national interest and the interest of our blue Pacific continent. Mr. Speaker, the FSM has formal diplomatic relations with 95 countries, most recently with Bulgaria, Bahrain, and Panama. The FSM is a member of 20 international organizations and 9 regional organizations. Keeping track of our foreign relations and ensuring that these relationships, Mr. Speaker, serve our citizens' interests remains a core pillar of our work of our Department of Foreign Affairs. With regards to foreign affairs, Mr. Speaker, and our overseas missions, this administration has made positive investments with the support of Congress, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you, by way of shifting from renting office space to purchasing properties abroad to house our consulate offices and embassies. Owning infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, abroad will increase in value over time, and we greatly appreciate Congress's support. Last May, we purchased a new consulate office in Portland. Next month, we will celebrate the opening of the new property of our embassy in Japan. That said, Mr. Speaker, I would solicit Congress's support for considering additional funding to our embassy and consulates in the United States. For our Washington, D.C. embassy, we are asking Congress for a $3.5 million property that will better allow us to serve our citizens. For Honolulu, we are exploring $5 million property in the downtown area, as the current structure is difficult to get in, dangerous at night, and physically cramped. Particularly since one can plainly see Micronesians, not Americans, in places like the Alawai Park. It is essential that our consulate in Honolulu be closer to our citizens that it serves. I also note that the government of Switzerland, Mr. Speaker, has continued to offer to host an embassy of the FSM in Geneva for several years. We get a lot of assistance from the European Union. The renewable energy in the amount of 20-some million is from the European Union. The executive is requesting approximately 400,000 this session for resuming the necessary work to explore the setup of a diplomatic mission which will allow the FSM to have physical presence in the European continent and greater presence in the United Nations. During the recent bipartisan visit, Mr. Speaker, from Australia, led by Foreign Minister Penny Wong to our country reaffirmed our interest to establish an embassy in Canberra, Australia. While an exploratory mission to Australia is not in the executive supplemental budget request this session, I would deeply encourage the next administration to consider that mission at the nearest opportunity. Australia's presence in the form of their embassy is been in our country, and it's about time, as you have agreed, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for the passage of the resolution by Congress supporting that we reciprocate establishment of our embassy in Canberra, and I thank you for that foresight. Mr. Speaker, while our nation's foreign policy is certainly essential to our development and place in the world as a sovereign nation, it is reasonable that the bulk of our citizens have their eyes and minds set at home here, what's happening in our country. While I have already covered much of our domestic policy in the form of major infrastructure development projects, I wish to briefly discuss key legislation during this administration that impacts our citizens. I again thank Congress for its leadership in moving forward on essential legislation during this administration, such as the ban on styrofoam and most forms of one-time use plastics, and the recent movement to allow FIDAL, FSM Petroleum Corporation, to include renewable energy in its mandate. I thank Congress for that action. Regarding the former, it is essential that the FSM be a leader in tackling climate change if other countries are to take our pleas seriously. Regarding the latter, I can recall advocating for FIDAL's transition to renewable energy during the first committee to wait on the President in the 21st and 22nd Congresses. Based on FIDAL's leadership demonstrating how such a change will benefit our country, Mr. Speaker, FIDAL is increasingly showing itself to be one of our nation's premier sources for innovation and economic enfranchisement, from the integrated coconut processing facility on Tonawas to the marketing of coconut products like soaps and oils for export. Anything our government can do to support FIDAL in its mandate will have a positive ripple effect on our people and our economy. And Mr. Speaker, I pause to say that COVID has really delayed a lot of this, and I've recently been briefed by the management of FIDAL that they are resuming the work to make sure that the coconut processing facility in Tonawas is resumed and constructed sooner so that it can benefit our nation by way of employment and by way of export of coconut products. That said, Mr. Speaker, there remain several additional pieces of legislation that this administration would like to continue to emphasize are essential for the national interest of our nation. While I have already spoken of the proposed cybercrimes bill from a national security perspective of equal importance and arguably greater importance for our economic development, Mr. Speaker, is the Maritime Spatial Planning Bill. And I know we've said more than enough on this Marine Spatial Planning Bill, Mr. Speaker, and maybe you are getting too many words already, but I cannot emphasize it enough. The Marine Spatial Planning Bill provides a legal framework to enable the FSM to have a process to allow for marine spatial planning, which is a purpose-agnostic and a public process of analyzing and allocating a spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas so as to achieve economic, ecological, and social objectives. In other words, Mr. Speaker, if the FSM is interested in maximizing our revenue from fisheries and from deep-sea bed mining, a marine spatial plan will provide us the information that makes this a reality. If the FSM is interested in conserving our resources and our environment so as to have the most profound impact on climate change, a marine spatial plan will provide us the information to make this a reality. A marine spatial plan is simply a good science, or simply good science, and while a marine spatial plan has no economic or political agenda of its own, a marine spatial plan will provide decision makers, Mr. Speaker, like you and I and the entire leadership throughout our nation, the information they need to make sure that the decisions we or they make or want to make have the greatest impact possible. Mr. Speaker, I would again emphasize that the Marine Spatial Plan doesn't hold us back from generating revenues. It simply gives us decision makers like Congress the information they need to make sure their decisions are impactful and supported by science. I would encourage Congress's passage of the Marine Spatial Planning Bill this session, if at all possible, Mr. Speaker. Again, I say we've said too much already on this, but I cannot help but to take the opportunity to also impress upon Congress the importance of the Marine Spatial Planning Bill. Another two key pieces of legislation which are interlinked are CP 2022-71 and CP 22-140. The former allows our Department of Finance, Mr. Speaker, and this goes into efficiency of our economic development and payment of taxes. The former allows our Department of Finance and Administration to issue tax IDs, which is essential for the implementation of our revenue management system. Today, most of our businesses goes to finance. Sometimes they can line up and they have to travel from far distances to go there to file their taxes. The latter allows the Department of Finance and Administration to obtain and inspect records so as to determine the accuracy of tax returns. It also allows for electronic records, which improves the government's efficiency and is in line with the digital FSM project for digital government services. These two bills will allow for other efficiencies and will improve the fairness within the tax system by allowing for the use of, Mr. Speaker, e-filing and e-payments, meaning businesses can sit in their offices and pay their taxes to e-filing and electronic filing and electronic payment. This would be substantially more efficient, will save businesses time, cost, and will also make our government much more efficient. We also enable businesses to pay taxes from their own business premises, as I have said, thus allowing them more time with their core business activities. This administration, Mr. Speaker, wishes to make it less burdensome to pay taxes, and I believe these bills are a step towards modernizing and improving our tax system towards that goal. I would also emphasize the usefulness of CP 22-84, which allows the Registrar of Corporation to register non-profit organizations. For comparison, Mr. Speaker, at present, the Registrar of Corporations has 141 major corporations registered in our country, of which 24 are considered captive insurance. We do not have the legal framework in place to allow for the registration of non-profit corporations to be registered. It is plausible that the registration of non-profit corporations will have beneficial impacts for our people. Mr. Speaker, I will also pause here because we've done a lot in our nation, and I thank you, Speaker and members of Congress. Worthy of mention, and our partners from MRA have recently visited us. We've met them both in the executive and in the legislative branches. With regards to MRA, our private and public partnership with the Micronesian Registrar's Advisory. Today I pause to thank former President Manny Mori because this goes back some time. During his administration and succeeding administrations, our relationship with the MRA has produced since fiscal year 2015. It's an innovative type of business for resource-poor countries like ours. We have collected a total of $241 million from that partnership. And I want to thank previous leaders like former President Mori, who's here, you, Speaker, and members of Congress for this innovative, smart business for a resource-poor country. But basically for our citizens, the way this works is that major corporations that are considered more multinational, they may be based in Singapore, in the United States, in Japan, but because of the system, they have the choice of registering their company in the country they please, and quite a few of them have registered in our country. So when it comes to paying corporate taxes, they pay our country, and that is a substantial revenue for small island nations like ours. And I repeat again my appreciation to former President Mori. Succeeding administrations and this administration continues to build upon that. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I thank our MRA partners for this public-private partnership that we have had productively over the course of time since 2015. I applaud the Congress for its continued advocacy for promoting our nation's workforce, Mr. Speaker. I share Congress's view that our workforce is the most important element of our production factor for both of our economy and government services. Frankly, if it were within the national government's jurisdiction to do so, I would advocate for a national minimum wage. As a member of Congress, I've asked our legal staff here, and I know Lam has been here for a long time, whether Congress has the jurisdiction to set a national minimum wage, and I was told that we don't have that extra jurisdictional authority to do so. And so our citizens would understand that for the state's salaries to be increased, it has to be done with the respective legislatures in our 4 respective states. And so today, I want to pause that national government can only impact national employees. I wish to speak about the recent law to increase the salary of our public servants by 45%. Mr. Speaker, both Vice President Balik and I applaud and thank Congress for your bold decision to increase the salary of our public service employees wages by 45%. This is likely to assist the government in retaining talent, as well as increasing productivity, creativity, and service delivery. Particularly as the salaries of our public servants have been capped or frozen for the past several decades, believe it or not. I know we've done, even while I was in Congress, sporadic increases, but not as comprehensive as taken by Congress recently. I note that we are including in our supplemental budget request this session and ask for necessary monies to support this new law, which took effect January. And Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share with you that it's in our recently submitted budget for Congress's consideration. I thank you for that leadership. That said, our public service system will continue to face challenges. In addressing these challenges, I would like to highlight the importance of CB 22-612, which lifts the ban on salary freezes, especially on step increases as a result of Public Law 9-155. I could be corrected, Mr. Speaker, as you are the lawmakers of this country. Lifting the salary freeze, it may have already been done, doesn't simply put more money into employees' pockets, though it has that effect as well. It would allow the government to resume employment evaluation as an important tool in measuring employees' performance. That's an important mechanism in our public service system that provides work incentive as providing measurable means of accountability within our government, which ultimately helps to keep workers happy and productive. Mr. Speaker, keeping our workforce happy and productive remains essential to our nation's development. And I want to just touch something that is not so positive, and I ask that you bear with me. I warn that this State of the Nation address will be lengthy, and I thank you for your generosity and patience. One item that is not so good for the nation is how migration continues to be a major challenge for our nation, Mr. Speaker. We saw, for example, more than 2,000 citizens permanently migrate from the FSM in 2020. I was surprised as a president during the COVID lockdown that this kind of statistics was presented to me. And I didn't believe it because even flights were curtailed or limited during that time. And a further 2,500 citizens permanently migrated in 2021. The average age, I want to share this, Mr. Speaker, of these citizens is 25 years old, and the median age is 28, meaning that we are disproportionately losing our youth. That's why I believe it is important that our nation, Mr. Speaker, move forward with the FSM Skills and Employment Enhancements Project, which I have spoken to about, the 17.7 million generously donated by World Bank pending in Congress. Generously funded by World Bank, the project will see massive increases in vocational education programming across each of our 4 nation states, as well as construction of a vocational education at the former BAT site in Bombay. This program improves access to vocational training to marginalized groups such as girls, children, and disabilities, and outer islands youth. It will see the improvement of vocational curricula, inclusive of the training of teachers, upgrading of classroom supplies and equipment, and the aforementioned vocational school itself will draw students from across our Micronesian region. In addition, I would propose another measure to boost our workforce performance by way of providing future investments and security for employees after retirement through a pension plan. The executive branch intends to include, Mr. Speaker, as I have shared with the members of the Committee to Wait on the President, for a national pension plan for FY 2024. And this important topic is one that I encourage significant public discussion or debate on, but we intend to include the budget in the FY 2024 submission to Congress. The FSM and the Pacific at large can be proud that our tuna stocks, if I may turn to fisheries, Mr. Speaker, our fisheries sector remains the primary source of domestic revenue. And in this respect, we can continue to be very proud of both government and non-government employees in keeping this sector resilient and capable. As you know, Mr. Speaker, so well, the Vessel Day Scheme, or the VDS, which we use, continues to be the most viable management tool that ensures the conservation of tuna resources, while also earning an average of 70 million for our nation every year from our exclusive economic zone. The VDS is further leveraging tangible economic development activities in Kusai and Bombay under the direction of the Fisheries Investment Policy. Mr. Speaker, the FSM and the Pacific at large can be proud that our tuna stocks, with report that I've been given from our NORMA agency or authority, remain healthy. We are addressing illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing through our fisheries compliance strategy that promotes collaboration with industry and is additionally reported by the FSM, Maritime Police, and the U.S. Coast Guard. Although the COVID-19 pandemic suspended the placement of human observers, you know that we put observers on these vessels, and we will be ready to return to place observers on purseine fishing soon, I was told, and been given that information. When coupled with the electronic monitoring equipment on long-line fishing vessels under the Technology for Tuna Transparency Program, or the T3 program, the FSM is well on its way towards having 100% transparency tuna fishery program. It is also worth emphasizing, Mr. Speaker, that the FSM has formally defined the boundaries of our exclusive economic zone and further extended the boundaries of our seabed. While much work in this area began under previous administrations, because it is a very long-term work and will continue into the next administration, there has been significant movement in extending our continental shelf, such as the recent approval of the Ontong Java claim, which adds seabed territory the size of a large country, believe it or not. It is very large, extending our seabed beyond our exclusive economic zone. Given the success of our fisheries sector, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage ongoing dialogue between the government and its fisheries or fishing industry so as to determine where and how we can attract genuine investments in our shores or on our shores. In particular, Mr. Speaker, there may be value in strengthening the capacity of our competent authority, which Congress has enacted by law, to help add value to tuna exports, especially to the European market. These and related conversations will help the FSM to show its appreciation to our fishery sector, to encourage more FSM citizens in finding economic opportunities at home, and could lead to solutions to continuing problems such as increasing number of crew who are migrating abroad. The nation's only fully established post-secondary institution, and I thank our interim president again, the former President Manny Mori here. The College of Micronesia, FSM, has been successful at maintaining its accreditation standing over the past 6 years. During that period, a total of 2,274 degrees and certificates were awarded in the college's 34 fields of study, which includes 2 bachelor degree programs, the bachelor degree in elementary education and the recently approved bachelor's degree in business accounting. Student success continues to be the mission of the college, ensuring that our young people are graduating with the skills necessary to feed into our national development. With the support of Congress, Mr. Speaker, the college has strengthened its public health training programs in nursing and the doctors and dentists for tomorrow program. 108 nurses have graduated since fall of 2018, whose assistance has been essential as our nation continues to combat the crisis of non-communicable diseases or NDCs. Despite the pandemic, or possibly because of it, Mr. Speaker, COM-FSM enrollment has seen at record highs. Campuses across the FSM are increasingly showing a unified approach to online delivery of courses, and the college continues to make great efforts at filling or filling vacancies. I am pleased to announce that the Board of Regents has named a new president, has been issued in the media, to begin her post next month, Dr. Teresa Koroifoluo, no, I hope I pronounce, I believe she's a Fijian national, with substantial experience. As COM-FSM prepares to celebrate its 30th anniversary this year, it is worth reflecting on how the college has partnered with the private sector in technical programs, including agriculture and food security, tourism and other vocational fields to ensure good quality of life for our citizens. That said, Mr. Speaker, as many of our families prepare to send their children abroad for their higher education, it is worth re-emphasizing that the FSM is a full-fledged member of the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education, or known as WICHE. We achieved this membership recently, not long ago, during this administration. The practical result of our membership in WICHE is that FSM students studying in most U.S. states and territories inside and westward of the Rocky Mountains qualify for 150% of in-state tuition for eligible undergraduate programs, and in-state tuition for eligible graduate programs, significantly reducing cost of these degrees. What that means, Mr. Speaker and members of Congress, is that the millions of money that we appropriate for scholarships for our students can stretch much farther to giving more students opportunity to get higher education. That said, as many of our families prepare to send their children abroad, Mr. Speaker, I think I've said that, but I thank Congress for its partnership with the executive branch in the work that we do to make sure that education remains a very strong component of our priorities. On the elementary and secondary levels, however, our nation, Mr. Speaker, our report is not going to be rosy because as a nation, small island nation, we have many challenges that we still need to pay much more closer attention to. Our nation continues to see genuine struggles. It remains an unfortunate truth that the majority of our children, as measured by the standardized test results, broadly cannot read in English or perform adequately in mathematics. This is, of course, a problem that is magnified in our public schools and significantly less of an issue in private schools. In this regard, it is noteworthy, Mr. Speaker, that our FSM school accreditation systems focuses mostly of its efforts on infrastructure, process, and procedure, and little of it towards student performance. It is broadly good news that 110 of 156 evaluated schools this year are accredited under our system. Just as it is broadly good news that 91% of our teachers, and this is a commendable news that I want to share, 91% of our teachers possesses the necessary certification qualifications. These results are in part due to the ongoing improving the quality of basic education program, generously funded by the Asian Development Bank and our development partner, Australia. Yet it cannot be emphasized, Mr. Speaker, enough that unless we take our education crisis seriously, that we will continue to see an increase in the gap between the have-nots, or the rich and the poor, if I may say that, and by extension, citizens who are educated enough to find gainful employment in the FSM compared to citizens whose comparative lack of education leads them to migrate outwards out of concern of becoming economically disadvantaged citizens on their own islands. Now, I say this, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes a small island developing nation would be a little bit embarrassed about some of the challenges that we have, but fortunately, our island communities, I've just returned from Hawaii not long ago, and I see homeless people on the streets and on the sidewalks more than I've ever seen in the past. I know that I'm saying some of the challenges that we face, but the fortunate thing that our country still has, which is beautiful because of our traditional system, because of our family system, we don't see that in our country. Our system of taking care of our seniors and our families works very well. And as a nation, we still do rely much on subsistence farming, fishing, that supports our livelihood. And in this case, I thank our traditional leaders who are based here, because as leaders of our nation, they largely encourage also that we emphasize local production of our local food to improve health, reduce NDCs, and import substitute. Mr. Speaker, I am getting close to the end of this State of the Nation address, so bear with me just a little bit more. Mr. Speaker, while it is certainly the case that we are seeking additional funding in the education sector from the United States, it continues to serve against our children's interests that we collectively at the national and state levels do not inject enough domestic revenue into our education system. I would solicit Congress, and I include myself in it, in this administration, and the state governments to consider, our collective nation to consider pathways for identifying how FSM domestic revenue might be used and improved, increased to permanently support our schools and education system on an annual basis. It is difficult to see, for example, how we are protecting our own ethnic and linguistic minorities, such as the people of Kapingamarangi, and I use Kapingamarangi because they're the farthest southernmost island, when their own school receives about 1,000 per year for school supplies, and this is from our own statistics. I was recently in Mokil, on the island of Mokil, during a recent visit. I also witnessed a teacher that is teaching multiple grade schools because of lack of funding to get additional teachers. And so our remote areas are not quite supported by our structures of government, Mr. Speaker. And I think we have to look inward in these types of challenges to challenge ourselves to see how we may help our citizens who are not quite enfranchised in terms of receiving enough funds for the basic education and basic supplies they need as students. And it remains a frequent concern among many communities that simply due to the lack of funding, students must spend in these remote areas, Mr. Speaker, significant time copying text from the chalkboard simply because there is no budget for the production of reading materials, tests, and assignments. Now, I'm not making a sweeping thing that it is the case all over our outer islands, but there is in fact this type of challenge that we still see in our remote outer islands. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the last major topic I wish to discuss today is regarding our Department of Environment, Climate Change, and Emergency Management. While I am always proud of all of our national departments, offices, agencies, DECAM deserves specific attention due to its key role in tackling our nation's single most pressing issue. It is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, that at the forefront, I recommend that we collectively consider, and I'm not sure, Speaker, I know this is your house, but because it was my house too when I was a member of Congress, because of the highlights that has been given to climate change today, you may have done it already, but I recommend that we collectively consider upgrading the Special Committee on Climate Change in the FSM Congress to a permanent committee. This may have been done already, because I know that this committee was created by you, Speaker, because of the attention to climate change, with the same title, attention, and care as in the case of J&Co Committee and the Ways and Means. I am pleased that we continue to implement the annual Micronesia Cleanup Day event. For 4 years in a row, Mr. Speaker, now as a result of the Micronesian Islands Forum held in Chuuk in 2019, the next Micronesian Island Forum will be held here in Bowen Bay State this coming February or next month, from February 13 to the 17th. The Micronesia Cleanup Day Committee meets with an expanded Terms of Reference or TOR to align with other international days such as Earth Day, World Environment Day, etc. The Reach to Reef project completed its work, and it's very important as as a president, I get to witness the details of work that I, in previous capacities, never witnessed. The kind of work that is or stretched from our reef to the inner mountains of our islands. The Rich to Reef project completed its work past November 2022 with its primary objectives to strengthen local, state, and national capacities and actions to implement integrated ecosystems-based management. And I credit a lot of the NGOs like the Conservation Society entities in Bombay, in Chuk, and in the other states for working closely with the government to making sure that our environment deserves the kind of care that it deserves. As the project concludes its final work, Mr. Speaker, I would urge Congress to continue to provide the resources to the states as they continue to work in alignment with the Blue Prosperity Micronesia. Another program that is worthy of mention is the Atlas of Micronesia. It is expected to launch this month, Mr. Speaker, with the final GIS. GIS is the Geographic Information Systems. I've witnessed this when I work with the State Department of Land, of mapping the outer and neighboring islands, concluding or will be concluding soon. This essential tool will support educators, students, and our nation's friends and allies and development partners. It's a tool that is used in planning. Through support from the Japan Mining Action Services, or JMAS, and Australia teams are addressing the leaking wrecks of World War II, Mr. Speaker, in the Chuk Lagoon. During this administration, when I visited Chuk, the governor brought to my attention about the impending potential of oil leak, which can potentially hurt the reefs and the surroundings in the Chuk Lagoon area. The work of the Japanese and the Australian teams are noble and helpful, and I encourage our citizens to support these teams if they meet in person, because this work is not only costly, but will help impending hazard that will hurt our environment. And I thank Japan and Australia for being forthcoming to partner with our nation with an area that we don't have the capacity, technical capacity to address. The practical effect, Mr. Speaker, of our nation's collective actions towards tackling climate change is that the FSM is becoming even more of a regional and international leader in protecting the environment. While this is elemental towards achieving our duty as custodians of our lands or these lands for future generations, a side effect is that promoting our environment has positive impacts for our tourism sector. We held the first ever Micronesian Expo this past summer in Bombay, and will hold the second Micronesian Expo this summer in the state of Koshai. This initiative is intended to preserve and promote our cultural heritage with the ultimate goal of promoting our islands as tourist destinations domestically, regionally, and internationally. Mr. Speaker, before I conclude my remarks, it behooves me to speak briefly about our fourth FSM Constitutional Convention. And this is a big topic for us. In doing so, I submit to my fellow citizens affirmation of how fortunate we are as a country to be able to live in an environment where our fundamental God-given right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is guaranteed by our Constitution, by the highest law of our land. As a people, we are indeed, Mr. Speaker, blessed to be given every 10 years, as is mandated in our Constitution, the cherished civic opportunity to review our Constitution so as to make it relevant to our collective livelihood as a people and to our collective growth as a country. It was in fact at this very chamber, Mr. Speaker, in January 2020, where I sat and presided over the official convening of the 4th Constitutional Convention of our country, serving as the interim convention chair. From then until today, Mr. Speaker, it continues to be a great honor to have been given the opportunity to serve like you and other members of Congress. I recall that back then, that my message to our elected delegates and our nation was that the review of our Constitution is fundamentally essential and monumentally critical to the history and progressive evolution of our country. This process essentially allows us as a nation the opportunity to ask ourselves the question of how can we make things better for our country? My fellow citizens, those of you that had elected to serve as delegates to the 4th Constitutional Convention, we now have with us 8 proposed amendments that serve as delegates' answers to that question of how can we make things better for our country. There is also an additional 9 proposed amendment through Public Law 22-172 that would insert a new section in the Constitution regarding the right of the people to a healthy environment, and I have signed that act into law, Mr. Speaker. Having been adopted, these 9 transformative proposals will be before all of us in July 2023 or this year for our consideration and voting. In doing so, I am duty bound to ensure that we are all provided the best conditions possible to enable the most informed decision, Mr. Speaker. For this, I have instructed for the creation of a nationwide education task force that has been organized and is ready to deliver public education and awareness of the 8 or 9 proposed amendments throughout our nation for the next months leading up to when we cast or you cast your vote this coming July of 2023. Comprised of national and state officials and infused with officials of Congress and members of the private sector and non-government organizations, the task force is ready to deploy education programs, Mr. Speaker, throughout our nation and abroad, starting on Friday, I am told, January 20th, equipped with the slogan of "Own your Constitution and Vote." It is for this specific reason that I wish to seize this moment, Mr. Speaker, to declare the official launching of the 4th Constitutional Convention Task Force Education Program for our country. Every citizen is encouraged to claim your ownership rights of our Constitution and vote. And I know that Isonan Gonovnech, as one of the delegates, and many of you, some within Congress, some within the executive, and throughout our nation, are delegates to continue the work. Mr. Speaker, there is so much to be proud of for our beloved and humble nation. It is and has been and continues to be my greatest honor in life to serve each and every one of you, our citizens, as your president. Over the course of this administration, I have sought to ensure that we empower and embolden young people and women like you have, Mr. Speaker and members of Congress, to serve in our government and to take the reins in leading our nation forward. whether they're financial prodigies, like, and if I may use an example of one of our cabinets, Secretary Eugene Amor, environmental experts and activists like Yolanda Choab Mori, or managerial experts like Secretary Elena Akinaka. I consider and continue to believe that our country, Mr. Speaker, is stronger when we see more youth and more women directly involved in the important work of governing our country. Because in this way, we are putting every talent to work and every citizen to work in the nation-building process. That's why, Mr. Speaker, I will announce this coming March, that this coming March, 2023, will be the last election that I participate in, to pave the way for future generations or next generation of leaders that are coming around, as I have stated. I will accept the will of the people regardless of whether I am voted in or not. If elected, I will continue for the last term, whatever that may be, and will be honored to serve this paradise in our backyards. If I am not elected, Mr. Speaker, as the mandate is from our people, you know very well, and the members of Congress, I will take the work of preparing the peaceful and immediate transition of power to the next administration very seriously and as a top priority, whereupon afterwards, Mr. Speaker, I will endeavor to ensure in my capacity, whatever that may be, that more youth and more women are represented in the seats of power and influence. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the state of our nation, this paradise in our backyards, the Federated States of Micronesia, is strong. We are entering a new era of prosperity, thankfully to the collective leadership of our nation and our development partners, our traditional leaders. Our people have shown that we can, we will, and we do take actions today for our nation's prosperity tomorrow. For this, and in my capacity as President, Mr. Speaker, I thank you, our honorable members of Congress, and our people across these four shining stars across the seas in our beautiful nation, for our collective goodwill and good nature in showing each other and our world that respect for human life and respect for one another is how we manifest our destiny, Mr. Speaker, for a brighter tomorrow. I thank you for your patience, especially to our traditional leaders, for being here, gracing us with your presence. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the honorable members of Congress, the entire leadership, most especially our citizens whom we've had the honor of serving. Kalangan lap, kiniso chabur, kamangar, kulomulalap. Thank you, Herere Chungol Sakarata.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency President Banuelo. The Sergeant at Arms will please escort Mr. President back to his seat. Short recess. Congress is back in session. We will now go back to our regular order. Under the order of business, we have reading of the journal. Acting floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we dispense with the reading of the journal. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. We now dispense with the reading of the journal. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is residential communications for item number 5. We are in receipt of one, and it's number 22-405.
Mr. Speaker,
Okay, assign that, Chief Clerk. Yes, Vice Speaker.
thank you,
Moses?
Mr. Speaker. I move that we stand in recess until tomorrow at 10.
Second.
Short recess. Tomorrow or Monday? So you come back, you just withdraw your motion, Vice. Congress is back in session, Vice.
Yeah, I would like to withdraw my motion.
Okay, without objection, the motion to recess is withdrawn. Next item, Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have some Supreme Court communications. As of now, we do not have any.
Okay, continue.
Item number 7, member communications. We have one, and it's number 22-16.
Okay, assign that, Chief Clerk. Next item.
Item number 8, departmental communications. We have 4 of them, and they are numbers 22-59 to number 22-62.
Okay, assign that, Chief Clerk. Next item, those two, Chief Clerk. Next item.
Agency or governmental authority communications, none, Mr. Speaker.
Continue.
Item 10, state communications, none also. Item 11, state Supreme Court communications, none, Mr. Speaker. Item 12, municipal or town communications, none. Item 13, foreign government communications, none also, Mr. Speaker. And item number 14, miscellaneous communications, we do not have any at the moment, Mr. Speaker.
So recess. Yes, so can we recess? Chairman Perry?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I amply ask that we stand in recess till Monday at 10 a.m.
It has been moved and seconded that Congress stand in recess until 10 in the morning next Monday. Those in favor of that motion say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Congress now stands in recess until tomorrow at 10. Until Monday, next Monday at 10 in the morning.
Mr. Speaker, I just